So, Heidi said she threw away thread that was labeled $1.20. Good job, Heidi. You know, my friend Annette, who's on here, she said, do I have to throw away all those old spools? And I said, you don't have to throw them away.
You can put them as a decoration.
Exactly. Put them in a mason jar. Do something really
If they're
pretty.
all the threads from your grandma, I swear you did something about thread a while ago, a long time ago. But I remember you guys talking about
just
old
put
thread.
them in a pretty jar and
think of your grandma.
Love on it and then bless it and give it away.
And don't use it. Teasing.
Yeah. I don't know. It's okay, Pat. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it. So, and we have a really cool little handout for you to learn more about.
It's a great thing to print out so that, you know, you just got to read it.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're talking needles.
There's not just one needle?
No, I know. A needle is not a needle.
That's what I thought.
Right? That's what I thought for a long time too. And you know what? To be honest with you, for the majority of things, a universal needle will do just great.
That's awesome.
But I thought it was interesting, and I'm going to be showing a little video here in a minute, but this guy that I was fascinated by a video presentation he did, and so we're going to show it to you. He talked about how it's like using a camera. You know those where you have a manual setting on a camera?
Oh, yeah. Don't have to touch anything.
And so you don't have to worry about anything. That's kind of, he compared it to how...
Gets the job done.
It gets the job done. It doesn't really matter, but it's not like... It's just easier just to use a universal needle. But once you want to get better at your sewing and have things improve, or you're running into pain points, that's when you start taking a look at this and going, okay, maybe I should be using a ballpoint needle. Maybe I should be using a sharp or a metallic or a quilting needle. There's lots of different needles for different things, right? And so it's kind of like on the camera setting, instead of doing manual, now you're like getting into ISO and you're trying to figure those things out, right? White balance and stuff like that. Okay. So I thought that was an interesting analogy, and
it just makes it just
we'll take a look at it.
Bit better.
Just a little bit
it's kind of like wearing glasses. I can see, but now I can see
a little more clear. Ooh, that's a good example. I like that. So today we're talking needles. And yes, we have a printout on needles. So, and
unbelievable information.
Really good information there. But I'm going to show you, I have some pictures I've collected to show you through some of the most commonly used needles. We're going to talk about the size of needle. How do you know if you're using the right size? And we'll talk about their different uses. Okay, so you ready for this? Get ready to learn, my friends. Get ready to learn.
One thing to tell you.
What's that?
I was long arming this morning.
Yeah.
And I needed to get this thing done. And I have been going through sweater fabric, sweatshirt.
The memory quilt.
Oh, the memory
quilt.
Don't give me a memory quilt with silk and ruffles and all kinds of things, because I had to get genius. But the first thing I want to tell you is about my needle. I think it's the needle. My thread kept fraying. I need to change my needle, but I didn't want to take the toy. But it broke like 3 times. I've got to change it. And then it, it puckered because it was really stretchy. I put a piece of paper in between the quilt top and my foot.
Good idea.
I'm like a genius.
You are like a genius. That's a great idea. I'm just texting Allison.
I was saying bad words because I needed to get it done.
Okay. Alice, I just texted Allison about your comment. Okay.
Oh, okay.
That was brilliant to be able to do that. Now, are you going to change your needle?
Yes, I am. I'm going to quilt my thing for tomorrow.
Scout's honor.
I'm going to go home tonight.
Yes, and you're going to change your needle.
Why would I need to change my needle?
Okay. Why do we have to change our needle? Well, let's talk about it. If you're having skip stitches, if your needle's breaking, if the thread is breaking, if you're just having something weird happening with your machine and you can't quite understand, one of the first things you do is you change your needle.
Also, if your needle is sliding out.
Yes, it could be
because that happens.
Yeah, it does.
I've had it.
Yeah, same. Yeah. And all of a sudden I look at that little area and I go, oh, that shaft is not all,
I checked
all the way
mine to
up,
make sure it was right, and that it's straight on.
Sometimes what can happen is your needle can be bent. Have you ever had that happen? No, never.
My friend has.
Yeah, that's right. Your friend that's going to go to lunch with me someday?
Someday.
Yeah. So the needle bent can be an issue. And sometimes at the naked eye, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's fine. And you kind of look over to it from the side and you go, ooh, there's a little bend in that baby, right?
I want to know what Mike taught me. I think it was Mike. He said, for my long arm, he said, you stick a pin in the eye of the needle, where your thread goes through, and see, and make sure it's going straight on.
Yeah.
But sometimes it gets off to the side. You're like, oh, so you could tell straight on. Because where that hole is.
You know what I'll do also with that pin is I'll make sure and I lift up my needle to go as far into that shaft as possible. Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be all the way up.
It has to be all the way up in order for it to
check
perform.
All those things.
Yep, exactly.
Before you bring it in to be repaired, because if you can solve it, it's even better.
Exactly. So let's talk about the anatomy of a needle. Here we go. You got the butt.
What?
We're talking shoulder, butt. There we go.
Okay.
Eye is the anatomy of the needle.
That's how I'll remember it.
There you go. But the butt is that kind of that tapered end at the very top. That's what goes into the shank, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not flat.
I guess I should say into the top of the machine so that your shank fits into the top of the machine. That's what more like it. Then you have a shoulder, okay, that just comes down from it. The blade, sometimes the blade will be referred to as the shaft, okay? And then you've got a groove and you have the eye and the point and the tip of the point. Now, did you realize there is a groove in most machine needles? A lot of people don't realize that.
No, I know there is one in my long arm.
And that's because it allows your thread to come down up as close to the needle as possible. So not all, but most have a groove in the front. Then you've got the scarf, which kind of is an indentation just right above the eye. And that is what actually, without getting into too many logistics on how a sewing machine works, that is what's kind of grabbing the hook race and bringing the thread back up. Okay, so now here we go. Let's talk sizes. Okay, this gets a lot of people confused. All of these different needles, they have what. Let me pull one out here. Let me bring this up right there. Do you see how it says 90-14? Again, it's like a fraction. And we talked about this yesterday when it came to talking about threads, right? Don't think of it as a fractional quantity. It's actually giving you information. So the 90, that's always going to be European, a European number. So that's in metrics. And American would be what most of us here refer to as the size and number. Okay. So when you see a 90-14, that's actually a really thick needle. If you were to take a look at this chart that I have in front of you, the lightest needles would be an 860, a 965, a 1070, and then it goes heavier and heavier, which means thicker and thicker. So let me remind you, yesterday we talked about threads. And what did we say about threads? We said that the higher the number, the lighter the thread, the thinner the thread.
I was talking to Crystal and she was mentioning this. Great way to
it's
to remember.
Opposite of your bathroom scale, folks. Opposite. We all wish the bathroom scale would do the same thing, but it doesn't. But when it comes to thread, it does. So the higher the number on the thread, the thinner it actually is. But when it comes to needles, it's the opposite. Why can't we all get together, right?
Oh my God.
Let's get it together. But there's reason for the weight, and I explained that
handout.
That's right. I explained the weight yesterday when really weight, what it means when it comes to thread is it means that it's how many kilometers fills in a kilogram. That's what it comes to weight.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I showed an example yesterday.
I'm going to watch tonight.
But so it's really, it doesn't seem like it's not really weight, but that's what they refer to as weight.
Okay.
There you go. So when it comes to needles, though, the larger the number, the larger the needle.
And
so here's an example. Okay. I want you guys to think about this, and I want you to comment where you think what might be happening. Okay. So 9014 would it be a light needle or a heavy needle? And so tell us in the comments what you think a 9014 would be.
Let me cheat.
Okay, let's think about it. If we think that the heavier it is, the bigger the needle. So 9014, what do you guys think it's going to be?
Big?
It's going to be heavy. Yeah, it's for sure. Yeah, it's the big one, right? So you guys are getting it. It's the heavy, right? 9014. What do we use that for? Most common would be for denim. Sometimes if you're sewing like handbags, you would use it on a handbag. Mm-hmm. You're going through lots of layers. Why?
Because we want a heavier needle. So
we want a heavy, sturdier needle, bigger eye as well. Okay. So then if you're comparing that to like a 7511, which is very common, that's going to be a thinner needle. So again, opposite of thread. So
is it
just
because
remember the opposite of thread?
The weave is not as heavy. The fabric?
It's definitely, it's more delicate, right? And so you need
doesn't take as much to go through
exactly, not as much to penetrate it, and it needs to have a really tiny a tiny size, right? So that you don't leave big holes. If you were to put a 9014 in something that was really thin, you're going to be left with bigger holes, right? So it just
you have to
makes sense for that. Yeah. Yeah. And a 16 is also well used for denim. Again, you're getting to the 9014 or the 11016. Those are going to be for denim. Okay.
The size of the needle, it doesn't have... Okay, this might be really dumb, but
that's okay. No dumb question.
It doesn't have anything to do with the weight of thread?
Yes, it can also depend on the weight of thread. So depending on the weight of thread you use, so let's take, for example, that's a great question, Kyle. Let's take, for example, we were using a 12 weight thread. Okay, so if you were with me yesterday, 12 weight is going to be heavier than 50. 50 weight is what we usually use for cotton piecing, right? But let's say we want to do like a top stitch on a bag, and it's going to be, we're going to use a 12 weight, which is pretty heavy. First of all, it's not going to fit in the eye of the needle of a 7511, right? But it definitely would for the higher sizes. So, Alice, did you explain what the second number as in 9014? They're basically the same number. It's just the 90 is European and the 14 is imperial, or what we use in America. Okay. So that's what it is. We could get into a lot of things also about how they measure, because how they measure, like Europeans will measure from the right to the left, and then Americans go from the front to the back. So there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that, but we don't have to worry about that. We've got a cheat sheet for you. You just know this is what it is. So don't get overwhelmed when you see a 9014 and you're like, well, which number is it? Here's your little kind of rule of thumb. Pay attention to the lower number, because the lower number is what we use here in America. If that helps. 14. So when people say use a 16 needle, that's usually referred to as like a 11016, European American.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, isn't this exciting stuff? Sure.
I need the cheat sheet.
There you go. And I do too. So many times I'm always like, okay, what needle would be best here? But
I don't know.
Let's talk. You don't always change it. Guess what? The rule of thumb is, and I'm not very good at this either, but the rule of thumb out there in the world of quilting is that you should be changing your needles every 8 to 10 hours of sewing.
That's one day for some people.
For some of you, that is one day, right? So
if you want the optimum
look because and quality. Ask me the last time I changed my needle.
When it breaks?
It's been a while. Yeah, when it breaks. But
if
I'm finding that there's skip stitches and my needle's breaking or my thread is breaking or shredding.
Anything's wacky.
That's your first line of defense.
Go there rather than go, I have to take it in.
Yeah, don't take it in yet.
No. You can do some of this stuff yourself.
Simple as changing the needle, right? So yeah, the needle is definitely dependent. Thank you, Jan. The needle is dependent on the fabric and the thread being used. Absolutely 100%. So let's talk about
some smart people.
What some of these are. All right, got pictures here. And I want to thank, I grabbed these pictures from Wikipedia, if you will. So, and then I took some notes here. So universal needle is probably the most common, right? This is the best we use for everyday sewing. Someone asked earlier, why is it that you don't have a lot of universal needles or D12? It's because it's the most common.
Because we sell
out of them like crazy, right?
I like a universal needle.
Yeah, and that could be, most common sizes would be an 11 as well as a 14. That's where you're going to see those universal needles. You're going to be able to use them for all kinds of projects, right? But, and it's kind of like the manual on a camera. It's like, well, I could use that, right? But there's some other things that it'll get the job done most of the time, right? But if you're trying to perfect some situations here, let's talk about it. Okay, when would you use a sharp? Now you can see these pictures here, right? That looks like a weapon.
Yeah,
you don't want to mess with that. So the sharp is what's best used for, let me put this up, for cottons or linens, and it helps create even stitching with little puckering. So you may ask yourself, boy, maybe if you're having some puckering or the stitches are uneven, maybe you have the wrong needle in there. Maybe you have a ballpoint needle when you should be using a sharp needle, right?
Can your needles get dull?
Oh, yes. And your needles can absolutely get dull. Okay.
So you think you've got a sharp needle in there and it could be dull.
Exactly.
Because you have not changed it.
Exactly. So let's talk about ballpoint needles. And you can see, again, the tip of that is much more curved, right?
There's no point.
Exactly. So why would someone use a ballpoint needle? Well, that's the one that's going to be perfect for knits. A ballpoint, if you think about it, it does not necessarily pierce the fabric like a sharp would, right? A sharp would pierce the fabric. Rather, it
kind of moves it.
Exactly. It pushes the fibers apart and goes in between. And the reason for that is it's not going to snag the fabric.
Oh, because once you snag, you're in trouble.
Exactly. And so if you have if you're sewing on a t-shirt, for example, and you're using a sharp needle, guess what could happen? It could, that point is going to go in and snag the fabric.
My friend had that happen.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure she
has. And that's what I was afraid of with this t-shirt quilt too.
So use a ballpoint needle when you can. That will help. Okay, have you heard of wedge point needles? They're kind of different.
No.
Wedge point would be, let me bring this up. Those are the needles you want to use. It's great for leather, suede, and vinyl. And the thing I thought was really interesting is it says that it creates a hole that is self-closing.
How?
Self-closing. And it must be because the way it's tapered, and when it comes back out, it just kind of sucks it back in. Don't ask me the phenomenon, but I find it intriguing.
They should call this a unicorn one. It's magical.
Exactly. We'll call the wedge one the unicorn. There you go. Then you've got a quilting needle. Now this one, I'm not, I've used universal, I've used quilting, I don't know, but this is interesting. It makes it easier when you're sewing more layers at once, and the tips of the needles are tapered to avoid risk of damaging delicate fabrics. So, if you're working with some more delicate fabrics, maybe a quilting needle is the way to go. Smaller point, smaller eye, and that could be very beneficial for you. Okay, one of my favorite needles out there on the market is the top stitching needle. Take a look at that eye. It is definitely bigger. And with top stitching, you're going to use that for if you want a heavier or more visible stitching. The eye is large enough that you could actually fit 2 threads if you wanted in there for an extra heavy stitch. Have you ever thought about using 2 threads?
No. What?
In a single needle?
It kind of, in a sewing machine?
Yes, you could do it in
what
a
about
sewing
the
machine.
bobbin? The bobbin just still one?
Yeah,
I'm going to try it.
Absolutely. I know. So if you're going to try it,
because that'll change the whole look.
Make sure you use a top stitching needle. So I'm thinking like a top stitch would look really nice. If you're putting together an apron, it's like that finishing
professional
touch,
look.
more professional look. Whenever I do top stitching, here's another little tidbit. I always go I lengthen my stitch length. So if my stitch length was at like a 2.0 or 2.5, when I top stitch, I actually take it up to a 3.5.
That far, huh?
That far. No further than that.
Because it's not holding the garment together or the fabric
it's just
together.
Really adding that more of a decorative, and it looks more professional when you have those stitches a little bit longer when it comes to top stitching. All right. Whew. Couple more things.
Lots of good information.
Oh, yes. Okay. So top stitching. Last one. Embroidery needles. Okay. Again, when are we using this and why? Embroidery is actually specially coated, and it has a larger eye, which allows smooth thread flow at higher speeds. So if you think about it, the embroidery machine is going boom, 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 right? So fast. And so it needs a larger eye, which is also like for metallic needles, same kind of thing. It's going to be a larger eye. It's going to reduce the friction. You get heat when that goes, and that's why sometimes things can snap. The thread can snap. Same with the metallic threads, they can snap.
Yeah, I don't dare do metallic because I know
if you're going to do metallic, it's not as bad as it seems.
Really?
But slow down your machine. Slow down your quilting.
That's a good idea.
So your quilting, or if you're doing it on an embroidery machine, slow it down, and you'll have much better luck. Okay, that was all that in a nutshell, right? No, we're about to do the video. So we have a video to show you, which I thought was fascinating. I want to give a shout out to the guy who put it together. Let me bring this up. Thank you to the Wool Patch that's in the UK for this excellent video. So I want to make sure and give credit to them on YouTube. And I thought, wow, this is excellent. So enjoy his British accent.
Oh, I will.
Beautiful. Okay, let me pull my screen up and take notes if you want to, but this is really, really good information.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Wool Patch and our sewing machine needle video. Let's access the databanks now and tell you all about them. Sewing machine needles are classed by 2 characteristics: the size of the needle, which refers to the thickness of the needle shaft, and the type of the needle for a specific purpose or project. You'll see these 2 characteristics, the size of the needle and type of the needle, on the front of any pack of sewing machine needles. Let's take a closer look at a sewing machine needle. At the top, you have the shank. One side is rounded, the other side is flat. The flat side always goes away from you when putting in a new sewing machine needle. You then have the shaft of the needle. At the front that's facing you, there is a little groove where the thread will sit. Behind, facing away from you, is where we have the scarf, and this is changed according to the type and purpose of the needle. You then have the eye, where the thread will go through and the point. And it's this point and eye that change according to the type and the purpose of the needle. And it's these two that can have a big impact on what you're sewing and how well it sews. So let's talk about the type of needle first. This is a universal needle. This is the needle that probably most of us will buy. The universal needle has been designed with a point that is slightly rounded. The technical term for this would be a slight ball point. I suppose it's a mixture of pointiness for woven fabrics and ball pointiness for knits. It makes this needle very universal. It will sew most woven fabrics, knits and synthetics. To make all this easier to understand, think of it like you were a photographer and you have a posh camera. Universal is like the auto setting on the camera, you know, that sort of green mark that you have on the dial. You leave it on there and off you go. You would point and shoot and let the camera do the work for you. It takes good pictures on the whole, and you don't have to think. It will change the settings accordingly. Universal needles are the same with your sewing. The everyday casual sewer, like me when I first started sewing, can now sew pretty much all they want project-wise without having to get too technical. So I could sort those curtains out and shorten them. I could make a project bag out of cotton. I could lengthen a pair of trousers. I could even make a t-shirt out of the jersey knit fabric. I don't have to think because the needles have been designed to work universally across most fabrics, like the green auto setting on my camera. But after a while of taking pictures or videos on auto, you start to experiment with the settings in order to improve your skills and up your game as a photographer. I'm starting to now play around with the ISO, the white balance and other settings on the camera, and I changed them specifically to the situation I'm in regarding the photo or filming. The same is now happening with my sewing. So if you really want to improve your sewing, you would go into more detail with your needles and choose a specific type for the purpose or project of that time. So I don't use those universal needles anymore. So here's the lowdown on all the needle types and how the points and eyes differ for specific purposes and projects. The ballpoint needle. This is ideal for cotton knits, interlock, rib knits, fleece, double knits, suede, and most knit fabrics or jersey. The tip is more rounded than the universal needle, and it's designed to push the fabric fibers apart than cutting them, preventing the knit fabric, we call it jersey as well, from laddering or running after stitching. The stretch needle. This is designed especially for two-way stretch knits. Spandex, lycra, power net, silk jersey, anything that's highly elasticized synthetic fabrics. Not really for your average jersey. Use the ballpoint needle for that. The stretch needle has a specifically designed scarf to help it prevent you from getting skipped stitches. The jeans needle, ideally suited for denim fabrics, heavy twill, workwear, or densely woven fabrics such as canvas or heavy linens. This needle is engineered to have a very sharp point and a stiffer shank to resist needle deflection and allowing penetration of a really dense fabric. The metallic needle, sometimes called metafill too, ideal for sewing and embroidery with rayon and metallic threads on woven or knitted fabrics. The metallic needle is designed with a very large eye, allowing the threads to feed through freely as you sew without splitting, burring or shredding, because metallic thread tends to be a lot thicker as well. This needle is also suitable for general purpose sewing, giving the added advantage of being easier to thread due to the bigger eye. So if you're struggling to see, use a metallic needle. The sharp or microtex needle. The sharp point of this needle is designed for stitching tightly woven fabrics and is ideal to use with silk, microfiber, and other synthetic fabrics. The sharp point will give you a perfect straight stitch, making it an ideal needle for top stitching and patchwork. The quilting needle. Ideal for piercing and quilting layers of cotton fabrics with the wadding, batting in between, or even if you're just piecing and you're going through several seams. It has a strengthened shaft, which also helps to reduce needle deflections as the needle goes through multiple layers of fabric. So the quilting needle is perfect for that because of that strengthened shaft. The leather needle has a cutting point and is used for sewing leather, suedes, and difficult to sew projects. It is often referred to as a chisel point needle because the point resembles and acts as a chisel in motion. The top stitching needle. And I have to say, this is my favorite needle and is the one I use an awful lot of the time. In fact, nearly most of the time. It has an extra large eye, which accommodates thick top stitching thread. Extra sharp point too, which allows the needle to penetrate through all the fabrics, like you would do when top stitching or even when quilting. The embroidery needle is specially designed for machine embroidery using rayon, polyester or cotton machine embroidery threads. This needle features a wider hole to allow the thread to pass through freely. Think of that needle going up and down many, many times and very, very quickly. Another feature is a pontoon scarf with oversized bump to reduce the chance of skipped stitches, which can result when fabric is flexing up and down rapidly with the fast-moving needles, what we just talked about. That's the type of needle covered. Let's talk now about the size of the needle. All sewing machine needle packaging will have two sets of numbers written on them. These numbers refer to two systems, the European system and the American system. The American system is imperial numbers, the European system is metric. The larger numbers are European and the imperial numbers, the smaller numbers, are American. The larger the numbers that you see, the thicker the needle. The size then links to the fabric that you're using. The larger the numbers, the thicker the fabric you can sew. Conversely, smaller numbers are for sewing finer fabrics. You can buy different sizes of needles according to the purpose or project. So, for example, jeans, you could buy 90-14, a pack of. But the Class A needles that I sell also sell a mixed or an assorted size. So you might get a 90-14 or a 100-16. So now we can see how clever the universal needle is, because it can carry pretty much any one of those categories from a 70-10 to a 90-14 and will cover most types of fabric. But if you're doing a specific purpose or project or a specific sewing project with a specific fabric, then it's really great to try and pinpoint that size and use a specific needle rather than just the universal one. So there you have it, the two characteristics. You can up your skills as a sewer and
hands are here.
Oh my gosh, I went, oh shoot, I accidentally hit the wrong one.
As soon as she hit it, she went, oh shoot.
Oh.
I'm like,
here we go. All right, I hope you guys are still with us. All right, well, I hope you learned something new. I know
was interesting.
It was a little bit longer video than I usually like to show, but I just felt like
there's a lot of information.
He said it better than anyone, and I love listening to his voice.
Yeah. Trousers.
Trousers, yes. Someone said I'd be him in pants if I could have the trousers, right? So anyway, here we go. Oh, I hope you guys are still on.
Yeah.
Like, shoot. All right.
You got it back pretty fast.
It was pretty quick. Anyway, thank you so much, you guys.
It was good. That was, interesting.
Good information. Lots of information.
They can watch that again.
Yes, yes, you sure can. Definitely watch it as many times as you want to, for sure.